What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the first show of 2017. It's January 3rd here. We had a nice, relaxing weekend. A lot of fireworks, just absolutely amazing, and all of them illegal. But it was spectacular to watch from the back of our home here. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. There's a lot going on here. We're just hitting the new year full tilt bore here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Now, earlier today, Paul Ryan gave his first speech to the new Congress, or the incoming Congress, in his role as Speaker of the House, and basically slammed the door on any final hopes that Hillary supporters might have had for some kind of an upset on the 6th, which is when Congress formally accepts the Electoral Vote College. And Ryan made a couple of comments saying we got to respect the election, and we got to listen to the people. And yes, Mr. Speaker, you are correct about that. Because to all those members of Congress, and he kept hitting how many brand new faces there were. Apparently there was this huge anti-incumbency surge across the nation. If you forget who you're really working for, come next election, we're going to do to you what we just got done doing to Hillary Clinton, and all the election fraud is not going to save you. Because hopefully 2 years from now, when we have the midterm elections, we're going to have a new election system that is open, transparent, and verifiable, as opposed to our current system, which is designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud. Now, moving on to the stories, Washington Post is in the process of scrubbing the egg off of their face, following the revelation that the story they put out last week, on how Russia hacked a power station in Vermont turned out to be just more of the corporate media's Russia bashing, keep everybody scared, keep them off balance, keep them worried. And what it turns out has actually happened is, first of all, the malware in question is outdated. Anybody who's into hacking can find it on any of these websites set up for people like this to play with. It's originally from Ukraine, not Russia. It was not found inside the power station computers. It was detected on a laptop not connected to the power grid. And as far as the people who are up there at the power station, they're saying there is absolutely zero evidence Russia or anybody else were trying to break into that utility. Now, there's a little bit of hypocrisy going on here because the Pentagon has already admitted they hack into Russia's electrical grid all the time. But I guess our hacking is good and their hacking is bad or something like this. Julian Assange gave another interview to Fox News' Sean Hannity, and one more time stressed the source for the WikiLeaks DNC emails, Podesta emails, was not the Russian government. It wasn't any government. It wasn't any state player. How many times do you have to hear that before it sinks on in? This was an internal link. And apparently the attitude coming out of the White House is, we need it to be Russia, and thus it shall be so. And yes, it's bovine excrement, but if you're a loyal American, you will believe the bovine excrement, no matter how badly it stinks, or Putin will win. Now, a lot of people are starting to get very nervous over former CEO of the Clinton Foundation, Eric Braverman. He was last seen publicly in October, and along with Seth Rich, is thought to have been one of the potential sources of leaks to WikiLeaks of these internal DNC emails. There was word that he was starting to cooperate with investigators regarding what's going on with the Clinton Foundation. Maybe they've got him hidden away someplace, knowing what happens to witnesses who've got information on the Clintons. But he's not been heard from since October. It's time to put his face on a milk carton out there. Now, former NSA Director William Binney is out there saying that this report, this piece of shameless propaganda put out by the FBI and the DHS, had absolutely no evidence of Russian hacking. it's all supposition and innuendo, and we're sure it had to be Russia. We don't know actually what happened, but we're pretty certain that it was Russia because Miss Cleo told us so. She looked into her little crystal ball and told us it was Russia, and we believe Miss Cleo. But more and more security experts are saying that tracking this malware, it goes back to Ukraine, and there's no evidence it was actually actively being used to try and break into that power station. Now, Donald Trump is hinting that he has information about the so-called Russian hacking that is going to be released this week. He's saying he's got information about this, what's been going on that nobody else has, and he's sort of teasing it along that we're going to get that information. We already know it's not Russia for a very, very simple reason. If Russia had the ability to hack foreign elections, Poroshenko would not be president of the Ukraine right now, and we wouldn't have had 8 years of Obama, would we? It's just common sense here. Now, we're going to take a second to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. We're talking about the Washington Post's severe embarrassment over the collapse of yet another one of their real news stories about Russia, and it's just completely fallen apart. And, of course, with all this screaming about Russia hacking or somebody hacking and the hacking is bad, what you're being distracted from by the corporate media is what was in those leaked DNC emails. That's the part they want to lure you away from with sensational headlines about Putin did this and Putin did that. They don't want you remembering the actual content of the leaked emails. It's being Orwellized right now. And what they're not talking about, amidst all these lies about Russia hacking, is that the top levels of the Democratic Party, who are supposed to be neutral arbiters of the candidate selection process, sabotaged Bernie Sanders and handed the nomination to Hillary Clinton. And more than that, that the Democratic Party leadership actually detests the ordinary Democratic Party voter. I'm sure we have the same problem over on the GOP side. A little bit of arrogance getting out of control. Now, Donald Trump's spokesman, Sean Spicer, is out there saying, let's forget about Russia and focus on the fact that that recount that Jill Stein undertook in an act of sheer desperation to undo the will of the people did uncover massive amounts of election fraud. In Michigan and Wisconsin, some in Pennsylvania, plus that other recount started in Nevada, found all kinds of fraud with mail-in ballots, all of it favoring Hillary Clinton. So we know Hillary, in collusion with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, stole the nomination. There is a clear chain of evidence she was trying to steal the general election. Why aren't we doing something about that? Everyone's all hot and bothered to go and punish Vladimir Putin for the myth that he was rigging the U.S. election. The evidence of actual rigging points in a different direction. We should be following that. Now, Donald Trump is out there saying ultimately no computer is safe. Important stuff ought to be sent by courier. And far be it from me to suggest the incoming president is incorrect, but he is incorrect. The problem is if you're using the standard, known, built-in, off-the-shelf encryption, then Trump is correct. No computer is safe, as all publicly available encryption methods are fully known, if not backdoored by the NSA. But as we proved with our NSA challenge a few years back, if you develop your own encryption, you can secure your communications. Now, ultimately, though, the reason that there was a security problem with these computers is all these people, they weren't paying attention. They weren't taking responsibility. They just assumed that the computers were safe. They fell for phishing attacks. All kinds of violations of protocol, especially Hillary Clinton. Now, on her private email server, there were documents uncovered that originate from air-gapped secure server systems within the U.S. government. These are secure server systems that do not connect with the global internet. The only way those documents could have gotten from these secure Tempest Vault systems is somebody copied them onto a flash drive and walked them out of there and then copied them onto Hillary Clinton's server. Which brings us back to my suspicion that Hillary Clinton was replaying the 1996 Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests, and using the Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the money. And that needs to be looked into. Now, the liberal whiners are still out in force. Rosie O'Donnell is out there urging America to stop Donald Trump. There's less than 3 weeks to go to save America, and Donald Trump is mentally unstable. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. And I'll tell you right now, I would pay good money to see Rosie O'Donnell keep her mouth shut for just 5 minutes. Of course, her skull might explode, but I'm willing to take that risk. Now, as I mentioned last week, Obama, in his final weeks in office, is trying to polish up his legacy. He's trying to rewrite history so that it will move forward, so that the legend of Obama will be what he wants it to be. And apparently, there was this statement made by one of Obama's top advisors saying President Obama hasn't had a single scandal. That comment was met with absolute ridicule, talking at Obama's rap sheet as long as your arm. Judicial Watch came on back at Jared saying, you're being delusional. This is absolutely delusional here. No scandals? How about the great stimulus heist? Taking money from the American people, giving it to the banks in the hope it would stimulate the economy. It certainly stimulated the banks, but not much else. Operation Fast and Furious, spending your money to give Mexican drug criminals the very same kind of assault weapons Obama wanted to take away from you. Eric Holder being held in contempt of Congress. Then there's Obamacare. Don't even get me started on Obamacare here. The spying on journalists, the IRS targeting of conservative groups and activists, Benghazi, Hillary Clinton's secret server. It's now come on out that Obama knew it and was using it. When he came on out there and said, I learned about it on the news, he was lying again. The NSA spying scandal as a whole is a scandal that taints Obama's legacy. Polluting the Colorado River, major accidents with the Environmental Protection Agency, not to mention the Deepwater Horizon. Then there was the General Services Administration scandal, who were wasting huge amounts of taxpayer money on lavish parties and silly projects, opposing any sense of accountability. There was the VA death list scandal, Solyndra misbehaving by the Secret Service, and on and on and on and on. And Obama wants to go down in the history books as a great president. I don't think it's going to happen. We're already hearing the Nobel Committee is already publicly expressing regret that they ever gave him that Peace Prize. Now, getting on to this real news, fake news issue, which is an attempt to demonize any media that is not under government control as a prelude to outright censorship. And we're seeing Facebook come on out, pose itself as the arbiter of what is truth based on these other groups that it's going to have as objective third parties. And we're seeing they're already coming under attack, first of all, for being hardcore liberal positions, and Snopes has turned out to be an incredible embarrassment. Not just because of the embezzlement going on, not just because one of their editors is a former call girl and dominatrix, but apparently Snopes, if you look at pictures of their office, they're all junk food freaks, and as a result, Snopes tends to dismiss articles being written in Natural News or the Health Ranger or anything questioning the safety and efficacy of our modern medical practice. They're just arbitrarily thrown on out. And now, of course, we've got the Washington Post is out there saying that anybody who questions corporate policy or the U.S. government policy, you're obviously in league with the Ruskies. Going right on back to the McCarthy era. Oh, they're a commie. They're a commies. They're a red sympathizer. Destroy their career. Get rid of them. Now, there's over at Open Democracy UK, there's an overview by Ed Jones showing that just as we have here in the United States, Britain's intelligence services on a regular, routine basis plant propaganda, fake news, weaponized narrative. That's the new term. They don't want to admit they're actually using propaganda on you, so that's the new term of crap. We're weaponizing the narrative. And they're out there saying, we have to do this. We will not be able to keep control over you if you stop believing us. Over in Italy, their antitrust chief, Giovanni Pietruzella, in an interview with the Financial Times, said that fake news is leading to populism. The people are starting to get this idea that they should decide how the country is run, and that's why the fake news must be censored. Remember that coffee mug we sell over in our online store? The fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it, and that's where we are right now. So, article coming on over from the New American, no less, saying that there appear to be two agendas behind this screaming about fake news. One is to continue to try and delegitimize Donald Trump's election victory and undermine his presidency, and to demonize conservative or anti-globalist media websites in order to justify censoring them. And again, I want to urge caution to all of my fellow travelers on the road to the truth that the government is trying to plant fake news on us to make us look ridiculous, to discredit us, to open us up to lawsuits. We have to be very, very careful. We have to be more professional about news than the professional news organizations. We have to actually comply with the high standards of journalistic practice that corporate media has walked away from years ago. Now, the latest breaking news is Donald Trump is going to bypass corporate media completely. Anything he has to say to the American people is going to be put out there directly. Either White House TV or the media company being set up by his son-in-law, certainly by Twitter, certainly by Facebook. And I have no doubt the corporate media will then grab it and say, well, we're going to provide analysis and commentary. No, actually, corporate media, we're all grown-ups here. We'll do our own analysis and commentary on what the President of the United States says. We don't need you trying to twist and spin it as you have been doing all along, because we now see that's what you've been doing. Now, over the holiday weekend, there was a shooting at an Istanbul nightclub. A lot of witnesses there were saying that the shooter, who was still at large, acted very professionally, meaning looking like a trained military person. Just came on up, walked on in, killed 39 people, and escaped. Now, shortly after that, Turkish jets and tanks hammered 100 ISIS targets in Syria, which the shooter had to know was going to happen. And maybe Erdogan did this himself to justify escalating the war. We don't really know, but I'll tell you this. Given what we've been through over the last several years, I'm not willing to take this at face value that whoever walked into that nightclub was ISIS. There's been too many fakers going on here. Now, speaking of ISIS, they've responded to the attack by cutting off the water supply from 2 water processing plants on the Euphrates into the city of Aleppo. Just shut off the water. That's collective punishment. That's a war crime. Meanwhile, Syria's forces are continuing to find U.S.-made weapons as they clean out these terrorist positions in the city of Aleppo. At this point, anybody who doesn't understand ISIS and Al-Qaeda were really working for the United States of America. They are just not paying attention. Okay? Now, in terms of the lusted-after war with Russia, the U.S. is sending 1,600 tanks to the Netherlands to line up on that border and glare across at Putin and say, we're going to do bad things to you once we can fake the evidence that you hacked our elections. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about still this rattling of sabers at Russia. 1,600 tanks to the Netherlands. There's the cost of the tanks. You all paid for that. The cost to send them over there. You all paid for that. And they're over there saying, we need to deter Russia. I mean, that's ridiculous. Do you see Russian tanks massing on the Canadian side of our northern border or the Mexican side of our southern border? Do you see Russian warships tooling around the Gulf of Mexico? Look at a map, people. You know who the aggressor is in this war. And I'm gratified and a little surprised we did not have some kind of a false flag over this holiday weekend. But I still would not put it beyond the realm of possibility that they're going to try and kick up something in the next few days. Now then, down in Israel, Israeli police have now interviewed, actually they called it interrogate, Netanyahu at his home for 3 hours. Now last week, of course, Netanyahu was saying, this is all baseless, this is all ridiculous, and now he's kind of sweating because the interrogation lasted for 3 hours. It was conducted at his home, gives him the home court advantage. And they're saying that he will be questioned one more time prior to the completion of the investigation, and I'm sure that Netanyahu was in there like Bernie Madoff saying, oh, it's all the fault of the anti-Semites and the Jew haters. They did all this. I'm clean as whatever. Now, there's an upcoming date, and this is another reason why the United Nations vote at the Security Council to declare the Israeli settlements in Palestinian land to be illegal is so important. Because on the 15th of this month, 70 nations are going to gather in Paris to discuss the creation of a Palestinian state. And if they come to an immediate agreement, then that will just be the end of it. There will be a Palestinian state. Palestine is already recognized by the United Nations General Assembly. Israel's propaganda that there never was such a thing as Palestine has failed utterly. In fact, one of the gifts I got from one of our listeners are these amazing postcards, and they say right on the back, printed in Palestine. They're very old. I don't know how old, but looking at the serrations on the edge and the fact that they're black and white. One of them is of the Nahalal Girls Training Farm, and the other is of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. And but this very, very old. And, of course, we have all these Palestinian coins that have been sent to me by people. And I even have a scan of a postcard written and sent by Golda Meir herself. And the address says Palestine. So it's time for them to get their country back. And for everybody to calm down, for Israel to officially draw its borders and agree to live within them. This has gone on way too long. The Israeli government, on the other hand, is still trying to run their country like a Bronze Age tribal chiefdom. And apparently, Israeli officials are supporting a shoot-to-kill policy of Palestinian suspects. This is according to Human Rights Watch, saying that soldiers and police are being encouraged to kill Palestinians regardless of whether lethal force is necessary or justified. If you think they're a suspect, pull the trigger. That's what's coming out from Israel's government. So, anyway, a lot of concern being expressed over the fact that as of right now, this moment, all 10 of the active United States aircraft carriers are sitting at port. There are none over there patrolling the Middle East. They're all in port right now. And a lot of people are very, very concerned. Why all of a sudden, at a time when we're threatening Russia, threatening China, are the primary platforms of our power projection back at port? It seems a little bit strange. Now, let's turn to the economic news because there's a lot of stuff going on out there. Apparently, Wall Street banks have some $2 trillion with a T exposure to Europe's banks. $2 trillion with a T. We'll be back with more about this after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before I get back to the Wall Street Bank's exposure to the mess in Europe, Fox News was just now teasing the interview they have coming up tonight with Julian Assange. And they did something I feel is a little dishonest, because they teased it by saying, was it Russia? Tune in tonight. And we already know what Assange has been saying all along. No, it was not Russia. Now, let us get on back to this story where it's coming on out that Wall Street banks have a $2 trillion exposure to the European banks. That's trillion with a T, as in tango. That's a lot of money. And it looks like some of those European banks are about to go. They can't stop the debt from growing because central banking, by design, creates more debt than money with which to pay that debt until the system collapses. And because of globalism, it's all going to come down together. And I do not envy Donald Trump his job, because he's going to have to deal with it. And while he's trying and dealing with it, you're going to have the corporate media saying, oh, this is all Trump's fault. We had a great economy underneath Obama. No, we didn't. It's Herbert Hoover all over again. Herbert Hoover did not create the Depression in the 1930s. It was created for him, and unfortunately Donald Trump is walking into that same mess. It underscores the comment that came out from Joe Biden that Hillary's only goal in the election was to be the first woman president of the United States, and she didn't really have an agenda or a policy beyond that. So there's probably going to be another major implosion just like there was in 2008, probably even worse. And again, the fraud is just epidemic out there. The U.S. government has just fined TransUnion and Equifax for deceit over credit scores. Now they're rigging your credit scores so you can go and get a loan even though you really don't qualify for one. All right, let's grab a phone call. Paula in New Mexico. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Happy New Year.
Happy 2017.
Yeah. I want to ask you, of all people, you're the best one to ask, I think. You know, Obama throwing Israel under the bus when we've been, so chummy with Israel, and then, of course, we're all not allowed to say it's almost a crime to criticize Israel in America. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden he does the best thing he's done in his whole, presidency, and he lets the UN give Palestine its rights, I mean, that was a good thing.
I agree with you, and we're seeing all these people who are just appalled at what Obama has done. And I'm not saying that Obama did this because he thought it was the right thing. This could very easily be Obama giving the finger to Netanyahu for what a headache he's been for the last 8 years. But here's what's going on. Everyone's saying, the U.S. has traditionally protected Israel. Why didn't they do it now? And I think the closest parallel to that is, let's say there's this bank robber who's been robbing banks for year after year after year, and he always goes to the same guy to drive the getaway car. And then today he says, we're going to rob another bank here. And the getaway driver says, I don't want to do this anymore. The police are starting to come around. They're asking questions. This is a criminal action we're all involved in here, and I don't want to do it anymore. And the bank robber says, how can you refuse? You have traditionally been my driver when I rob banks. And that's basically the same thing we're getting from Israel supporters on this. The fact of the matter is that even though the U.S. has covered for Israel at the United Nations all these years, the official policy of the last several presidents has been the settlements on Palestinian land are illegal. They are violations of international law. I think Obama, again, possibly motivated by wanting to get one dig into Netanyahu before he leaves office, refused to veto the UN resolution. I mean, that whole room erupted into applause. Everybody's just been waiting and waiting and waiting for somebody to finally have the gonadal tissue to stand up to all the things that Israel is doing wrong. And now, of course, we have that meeting in Paris on the 15th, and I would not be at all surprised if there was a terror attack, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, say no more, the day before, as a warning to the people of Paris, don't you dare go against Israel. Palestine was a nation. It was a nation. Israel tried to erase them from the map, and now the world is coming back and saying, no, it is not right for anybody to go into anybody else's country and try and erase that country to take it over for their own use. That was the principle, supposedly, that we fought World War II for.
Right. And I thought, the only disappointment I have with Trump is that he doesn't seem to get it, that Palestine should be its own country.
Well, that's definitely an area where I do not agree with President Trump. I agree with him on so many other things that he said. I think, and I've mentioned this many times before, my main complaint against Donald Trump going into the White House, he is in as many ways as dangerously naive as Jimmy Carter was. Too much of his worldview has been shaped by corporate media, and even though he understands now corporate media is his enemy and is dishonest, he hasn't taken the time to work back on through and say, what else has the corporate media been lying to us about all along? And I think that after he actually deals with Israel's government directly, that he's probably going to have a wake-up call, and I give it at most a year, and we're going to see Donald Trump going into his second year in office decidedly cool on what's coming on out of Israel.
Okay, and I agree 100% with that. And I hope it's sooner than a year, though. I forgot what I was going to ask you the next thing, so that's okay. Thanks so much, Michael, because I know that's confusing a lot of people out there. You know, isn't this weird that he would, all of a sudden, Obama's done something good, you know?
Well, again, I don't think Obama's motive may have been noble. This may have just Obama, flipping the bird at Netanyahu on his way out the door. And we've seen presidents give vent to their ego. Remember the Liberty dollar? They were making these silver and gold coins. Bernard von Nothaus was the engraver, the minter behind all of this. And then all of a sudden they come out with the Ron Paul dollar, and the Treasury Department shuts them all down. These people are counterfeiting because they're using the word dollar, and people could look at these gold and silver coins and mistake them for official U.S. tender. It was nonsense to begin with. And the timing to the Ron Paul dollar is just way too obvious. George Bush's feelings were hurt. They didn't put his face on a coin. And now, of course, years later, they've come back and said, well, yeah, it really wasn't counterfeiting. The coins were not made to look like U.S. Coinage. And, the people got their silver and gold back, and Bernard is back in business with his Donald Trump dollar. And so presidents can let their egos get the better of them, and I think that may be the case with Obama refusing to veto the UN Security Council resolution.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Michael. And that's a great show. I'm enjoying it.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, we have been talking about the cash-free society and cash bans that are already starting in other countries like India, and it's caused all kinds of problems over there. And part of the rationale behind, or part of the reason seems to be to make us all dependent on the banks for all of our daily commerce for a small fee. But there may be another agenda at work, and this is coming out of yournewswire.com, where apparently Washington, D.C. Put pressure on India to confiscate gold, to pull back on the cash, and the result of that has been that the U.S. dollar is now the currency of choice for that black market. And we're seeing this also in Greece, where the war on the official cash, the euro, is resulting in a black market economy surfacing that is centered on the U.S. paper dollar. So this may be a way of reviving that whole petrodollar scam, where instead of forcing nations to be dependent on the U.S. dollar, they're forcing individual citizens to be dependent on that U.S. dollar in order to maintain hegemonic domination. Now, a German research institution is saying that if the standard of living does not improve for the people of Italy, count on them to exit the European Union. Because the message of all these private central banks anywhere on earth is always the same. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. You must make do with less so we can have more. And that's a tough sell when people are struggling just to stay alive here. Over in Washington, D.C., the capital of our nation, in theory, the flagship city, homelessness has doubled over the national average because of the soaring living costs there. If there's one city in the country you would think the government would want to present as favorably as possible to the rest of the world, it would be Washington, D.C. I mean, Washington, D.C. was laid out deliberately to intimidate and humble foreign heads of state. But they're not going to be humble or intimidated if getting to the White House they're driving past all these homeless encampments. It's a bad message. It's a bad image. Now, obviously, this last weekend, we had New Year's, and there were a lot of celebrations. As I said, huge display, amazing display of fireworks here on Oahu, virtually all of them illegal. I mean, you can buy firecrackers if you first buy a permit from the state. The permit actually costs more than the firecrackers do, by the way. And there were professional sanctioned shows down in Waikiki, but the rest of the island, no. And I did post a photo of what it looked like from our back patio area. But the photo doesn't capture it all because just stepping on out, looking horizon to horizon, from Diamond Head out to Electric Bay, it was just solid fireworks in the sky. It was just amazing. I wish I'd had a fisheye lens to capture all of that, but it was just amazing. Well, things in Europe didn't go quite so well. Apparently, almost 1,000 parked cars were torched on an arson rampage that seems to now be a tradition among the migrants here. Apparently up in Sweden, there was a video showing the migrants there taking fireworks and literally aiming them at the local people. Not shooting them up in the sky, literally aiming the fireworks to go hit people. Now, over in Cologne, as you remember, a year ago, they had this horrible situation where there was a mass sexual assault by the migrants against the women there, and the police decided they were not going to allow it this year, and so they saw a mass of these migrants gathering again. Some of them were already wanted. They took 92 into custody, and 27 more were arrested, and the rest were encouraged to go home. However, the liberals are out there saying, how dare you profile these people? How dare you get in the way of their New Year's celebration? And after all, if the girls get raped, it's their fault for dressing provocatively and not realizing they have to dress like Muslim women anymore. Meanwhile, a Muslim migrant of Tunisian origin was arrested on New Year's Eve with a shotgun, bomb-making materials, and a collection of fake IDs in his car. The German media is not reporting this story. You have to go to other countries to get the report, because Merkel has now banned the German media from reporting on any crimes or even acts of terror that involve the foreign refugee. She's trying to keep a lid on it. Not interested in solving the problem, not interested in changing the policy, just you people don't need to know. If you're reading about migrants committing crimes, you're obviously getting it from those fake news websites. How dare you do that? Now, the issue of the fake IDs is going to become a sore point because apparently the migrants are scamming the German welfare system by getting multiple fake IDs. They'll get 10, 12 IDs, and they'll go to different welfare offices and get a different check. And they're just raking in the dough on the backs of the German taxpayers. And then Merkel doesn't understand why the German taxpayers are getting upset about this. Apparently, up in Katrineholm, Sweden, somebody threw a hand grenade at the police station. They're still trying to figure out what that one was all about. Over in Austria, they had violence and sex attacks during the New Year's Eve celebrations. Looked very much like what happened last year in Cologne. And here's where things start to get a little bit murky, because, as you know, there was that horrible attack on the Christmas market in Berlin. And everybody's saying, what's going on? Why was this guy doing it? And the alleged perpetrator, Anis Amri, was literally doing what he did under the eyes of the authorities. It's now come on out that this 24-year-old Tunisian was actually driven to Berlin by an undercover informant of the intelligence service, which was monitoring this guy for months before the attack on December 19th. False flag? I think so. I definitely think so. Now then, a European Union leader has begged other countries in the EU, please no more referendums. Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico has pleaded for a ban on referendums, that people should not be allowed to decide their own future. What the heck do you think this is, a democracy? And they're clearly panicked that the EU is about to collapse, and it is, because of how the European people have been abused by the European Central Commission, both with that private central bank, the European Central Bank, and this refugee crisis. There's a tremendous amount of discontent in the streets of Europe right now. Now, here in the United States of America, the new numbers are coming on out. This is out of RIF.com. Apparently, since the year 2012, going on 5 years ago, 1,565 refugees have been diagnosed with active tuberculosis, 3 times the number previously reported. They're still trying to hide from you just how dangerous this is. Now, I remember when I was a kid, tuberculosis was just in the process of being eradicated. We had Easter seal campaigns and all the rest of it. And all of a sudden, tuberculosis is gone. You're never going to have to worry about it again. Well, unfortunately, yes, you do. And much of these TB infections are the drug-resistant variety. Very difficult, bordering on impossible to actually treat. This open borders refugee issue has become a serious threat to the public health. And I'm sure the medical industrial complex is all hot and bothered saying, oh, we're going to make lots of money from TB medicines and the rest of it. But what happens when the entire U.S. workforce is sick or autistic and there are no more workers? What happens to our economy then? We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to our show here. Still getting more news out of Europe from the New Year's. Apparently in the city of Dortmund in Germany, there was literally a mob of more than 1,000 men chanting Aloha Snack Bar, or whatever it is they say, launching fireworks directly at the police and set fire to Germany's oldest church. So tell us again, Angela Merkel, how this whole immigration refugee thing is going to work on out. And don't give me this thing, you're heartless if you don't let the refugees come on in. How about we go back and we look at all these U.S. wars of aggression that made these people refugees in the first place? Let's look at all these non-governmental organizations run by George Soros, who's pushing for his New World Order, who baited and lured these people into leaving their home country and coming to Europe thinking they were going to be given this wonderful life for free. Why don't we talk about the heartlessness of that? Now, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I don't think Erdogan would be behind that attack. I think that was the message, along with the Russian ambassador getting killed over there, and also the plane that crashed in the Black Sea. This is all, there's just too much to go on in this short amount of time, don't you think?
You could very well be right that the Istanbul Club was a warning to Turkey to pull back from Syria, and Erdogan basically went the other way and said, well, the heck with you, and attacked all these ISIS sites. But I got to tell you, just like the Christmas market thing, this Istanbul shooting, the description of the shooter by the witnesses there, military bearing, very calm, didn't seem to even react to the fact that he was shooting people, was either on some serious medication or it's somebody who's just used to shooting human beings.
Exactly. I mean, it was a professional job. I mean, they're easy to come by, I guess, for the establishment. People need to realize this is not a U.S. thing. This is a globalist, neoliberal, France, Germany, Britain, United States, Israel, plus the Wahhabis. This is a small group of oligarchs that is doing all this because they're afraid of losing power. That's what it's coming down to. The Wall Street bankers, the City of London, they had their fun for all this time, and they don't want to lose what they have, even though, like you said, Washington, D.C. has an increase in homelessness. They don't care.
No, they never have. They never have. Here's the problem, okay? at least in terms of the Wall Street or global money junkies, they're doomed already because the instant they linked all those private central banks together globally means they all share each other's fate. In the past, when a nation enslaved to a private central bank crashed, the other nations enslaved to private central banks would send in money to restart the scam and get it going again. But because of globalism, the whole thing is about to come crashing down all at the same time, and it will be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to restart the global economy on the first principle: no more private central banks ever, ever, ever again. Got to take a break for station identification. Thank you for the phone call, Dustin. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on with your comments and questions here. A little bit of news from the area of gun control. Apparently there is a franchise called Waffle House, and they have a strict gun-free zone policy, and to nobody's surprise, it's being viewed as an engraved invitation by armed robbers to just walk on in and take all the money. You can do a search for Waffle House robbed at gunpoint, and apparently just in the last few months, their restaurants have been hit in Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas. And apparently Dallas, Texas was actually robbed. The location in Little Rock was robbed twice on the same day. The robber in the Dallas, Texas area, they caught him, robbed 2 different Waffle Houses the very same day in December. Most of them get away with it. So what happens when you're working at a place and you're sick and tired of having people with guns come on in and take away all your money? Well, you fight back. And apparently a waitress was carrying a gun and fended off the robbers, thwarted the robbery, for which she was fired for violating Waffle House's gun-free zone policy. When are the liberals going to wake up and realize that gun-free zones are where the criminals go? Look at all those mass shootings by people whose brains are melted on prescription antidepressants. And they wag them at us to say, oh, take the guns away from everybody. Where do all these mass shooters go? Gun-free zones. Gun-free movie theaters, gun-free shopping malls, gun-free areas. It's time for a little more common sense to come back to our society. If the police are too busy with civil forfeiture to actually go on out and find the real criminals, then the only rational course is to allow ordinary citizens the right and the means to defend themselves, and that's what that Second Amendment is at least partly about. A sign that says gun-free zone is an open invitation to crime and mayhem. Come on in, have fun. Nobody's going to shoot back at you. I think it's time to replace all these gun-free zone signs with something that reads a little different. Dear criminal / psychopath / terrorist, 10% of the people in this area are carrying concealed. You guess which ones. Remember what happened in Kennesaw, Georgia? Now, this happened a lot of years ago, and you probably didn't see this on the corporate media. Kennesaw, Georgia was going through a major crime problem, and their response was to pass a law at the city council requiring every resident in that town to own a firearm, and the crime evaporated. It went away. Criminals and terrorists and psychopaths do not want to go where the people are armed. Sometimes I think that the gun control people are actually working for organized crime to make it easier for their lower level employees to harvest from the population, to create a safe working environment for their drug dealers and muggers and rapists and what have you. Because looking at the reality of gun control versus crime, it's very obvious that anti-gun equals pro-crime. Disarming the law-abiding has not solved the problem, has it? Not one tiny bit. And you know what really irks me on this issue? Every time there's another terror attack over there in Europe, and the corporate media comes in and says, you shouldn't blame all the Muslims for the actions of this individual. Why can't gun owners get that same deal? Anytime there's a shooting, oh, we got to take all the guns away from everybody. Liberals love to do that. That's their best solution. Somebody commits a crime with a gun. Oh, take guns away from everybody. That'll solve everything. Somebody posts something they don't like on the internet. Oh, take away freedom of speech from everybody. That'll solve it. It's amazing. Okay, now getting into the area of computers, with all this brouhaha over hacking, apparently there was a major computer outage at U.S. airports yesterday evening in the customs system, where when you're at the border checkpoint and they scan your little passport, or the new ones have the radio chip in them, and it goes to a computer and says, yes, this person is okay, that person isn't okay. That system broke down. And so as a result, people were just piling up behind those customs checkpoints. None of them could be let through. This went on for hours on one of the busiest travel days of the year, and I'm just waiting for somebody to come on out from the corporate media and say, this was Russia's hacking the customs computers just to annoy us and tick us all off. We're going to do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go to the phones here. Ken in Fort Worth, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, howdy.
Howdy.
Some people say that we start cutting up Israel or Jerusalem, God's going to cut up this country too. I don't want that to happen either.
Well, every time Netanyahu's made that threat, something bad does happen, but God's got nothing to do with it. It's usually the Mossad. And nobody's talking about cutting up Israel. What they're talking about is Israel going back to its original borders and sticking with them.
That's one thing.
Yeah.
And first of all, that country is over there and we're over here. But it scares me if, we start going over, so we're going to divide Jerusalem up or Israel up or whatever we're going to do, and guys come over here and make Mississippi bigger.
I didn't quite get the linking on that one, but let me clarify something here, okay? Nobody is cutting up Israel. Nobody's breaking it into parts. The city of Jerusalem was declared a shared city by the United Nations. It's supposed to be, because of its historic and religious importance, that city is supposed to be shared between the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, and another Orthodox group. And they're supposed to just share the city. But Israel has never been happy with that. Israel wants it all. And their behavior in trying to acquire it all is the bone of contention in that part of the world.
Maybe the UN might decide to divide up the United States, too. I don't want that either.
Ken, nobody's dividing up Israel. Israel's trying to divide up Palestine with the settlements so that there isn't a contiguous block of territory on which to found a Palestinian state. That's why Israel is so upset that the settlements have now been declared illegal. Because if you look at the settlement maps, they're very clearly placed to break Palestine into little tiny fragments. So it's Palestine that's being broken into little tiny pieces, not Israel.
Hope so. Hey, nice talking to you, Bush.
All right, well, thanks an awful lot. He hopes Palestine's being broken up. I think he just gave away his agenda. All right, we're going to switch over to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha, Glenn. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I heard about your Waffle House story. I used to drive across the country some on my way to school. Waffle houses are like, slightly smaller than your average house. They tend to be situated near highway entrances and exits. They're very, trucker friendly. They're not, strictly truck stoppish, but their locations near highway entrances and exits make for easy getaways and that sort of thing too. But that is so I just think it's amusing. I just heard Tom Hanks saying, stupid is, stupid does, man.
It really is, but, again, the liberal agenda is not the health and safety of ordinary people. It's control, control, control. and they understand that that Second Amendment is in that Bill of Rights so that we, the people, have the means to convince the federal government to respect all those other rights that are enumerated in that Bill of Rights. The government doesn't give us those rights. They recognize them. That's the hands-off list. And we have seen that list under constant attack. The NSA is openly violating the 4th, 5th, 9th, and 10th Amendments. We're seeing free speech come under attack with all this fake news nonsense or hate speech nonsense. We're seeing the Second Amendment constantly being eroded. Jim Fetzer came out with this article just saying, it's weird. Russia is turning into the United States of America, and the United States of America is turning into the former Soviet Union.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely loss of freedoms and, subversive, groups subverting the Constitution, yeah. About the Waffle House story, you mentioned this woman thwarted the robbery. You didn't say whether or not a shot was fired.
The article didn't... The phrase they used was fend off. And it doesn't say that shots were actually fired, but she was let go from her job because she was in violation with the gun-free zone policy. And one of the big complaints I have about the gun grabbers is they seem to feel that a woman lying dead in an alley, raped and strangled with her own pantyhose, is preferable to that same woman explaining to the police how her attacker got shot.
Yeah, exactly. One other thing you talked about earlier, you mentioned somebody using the term weaponized narrative.
Yes.
As if that's better than fake news. I think that's kind of a bad phrase because upon whom does one use weapons?
On us.
Enemy.
On us.
And an enemy, yeah.
Yeah, well, the government sees us as the enemy. We don't trust them anymore. We don't believe in them anymore. We don't do as we're told. We're straining at our slave chains, and they do see us as an enemy. Now, the phrase weaponized narrative is not a replacement for fake news. It's a replacement for propaganda. Because we all know propaganda's got a negative connotation. We don't want to be propagandized by our government. There used to be a law saying they couldn't propagandize us. They took that one back. So now they're going to change the name.
Weapon doesn't have, yeah, I know. But word weapon doesn't have a negative connotation as yet. That's the weird part,
Well, again, they're designing all of this with ad agencies and PR firms, and they're really not well suited to this kind of work.
They are enemies of the people.
Yes.
All right, thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443 if you want to call on in. Now, we're talking about computers. We're talking about this out-of-control epidemic of hacking. And, again, where is the NSA in all of this? Weren't they supposed to be protecting our IT infrastructure against threats? Or they're too busy amusing themselves to all the stolen amateur porn that Edward Snowden says is what's really filling up all those data centers here. Now, apparently hackers are now using WhatsApp to target unsuspecting users. They're sending Word documents that look legit, but wind up stealing your personal information, including banking data and login credentials. If you are a user of Word or any of those Microsoft Office products, you should go in and make sure macros are disabled, because that is where the bad stuff is in there. And one of the reasons I'm encouraging people to use OpenOffice is because you're automatically immune from some of the stuff that is Microsoft Office specific. The macros are wonderful for certain narrow applications, but you really should have them turned off, because that's where 90% of the attacks through Office documents come from. Now, as you know, ransomware is also spreading all across the country, and now it is starting to hit smart TVs, where, your TV is locked up. If you want your TV to work again, send $200 in Bitcoin to this address, which for people who are not yet on Bitcoin can be a real problem. Fortunately, a programmer has found a very simple way to unlock ransomware Google Smart TVs. You put it into recovery mode, hit reset, it comes back. But again, ransomware is a major problem. It's actually endangering lives when it strikes at hospitals. And you have to wonder, why is nobody in the government doing anything about this at all? Well, look at the civil forfeiture laws. It's a license to steal for the police out here in the real world, just grabbing money everywhere. It's destroyed tourism coming down from Canada. Nobody wants to travel here from Canada. There's too many horror stories of people who come into the U.S. on vacation and the police just take their money. Well, our government is still desperately broke. They're hopelessly in debt. So maybe the ransomware is actually coming from the government itself. Kaspersky has identified the Hacker Collective Equation Group as being NSA. And so this might be just another way for the government to pillage the American people, and that would be why the government is doing absolutely nothing about the ransomware problem. Now, over in Great Britain, as of the start of the new year, under the Investigatory Powers Act, everything that you click online is being recorded and saved for the British government to look at what you're doing. Now, I don't know what privacy protections exist or existed in Great Britain. Certainly, it would be a violation of the Fourth Amendment. It is a Fourth Amendment violation here. And here's the other problem. I think a lot of this is being driven, as usual, by the money, the funding. Oh, we have to have a system that tracks everybody's data everywhere in the world. What are you going to do with it? I have no idea. There's too much of it. We couldn't find anything in any of that data. There's just way too much of it. But by golly, we've got a system for snarfing it all up. These TV shows and movies you see where somebody sits down at a computer and instantly gains access to somebody's records. It really doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of work because there's simply too much data to go through. By the way, that reminds me. Over the weekend on the pay-per-view channel, Claire and I finally got to see the movie Snowden, directed by Oliver Stone. And this is a must-see about what was going on. The story focuses more on what happened to Edward Snowden that led him to make the decision that he made. And I'm sure they went to great lengths to not reveal anything too sensitive. But what they do reveal about what the NSA has been doing, and more to the point, the cavalier attitude that they had, that the Bill of Rights just doesn't apply. Freedom and privacy doesn't apply. We're justified in breaking the people's computers and stealing their data because we serve a higher purpose. We're true believers. And that's a phrase that you're going to find throughout history. And it's always been a problem for every political system, that you will have in there individuals who are absolutely convinced that because they serve some higher, more noble purpose, that they should be exempt from the laws and restrictions. I'm doing great things, therefore I can break the rules. And on that path lies tyranny. So the movie is Snowden. It's available on pay-per-view, and I recommend it highly, highly, highly. Now, I'm looking at an article over at WindsorStar.com. Sarah Kaplan, Donald Trump might just make going to the moon great again. And I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. Because I'm a big enthusiast for science in general, for space exploration in particular. And I think it's something our nation needs. Not to go put American flags on places all over the solar system, although that would be nice. People feel good about that. But if we're going to rebuild our economy, we have to rebuild our manufacturing. We have to get back our lead in manufacturing that was foolishly allowed to move to other countries under preceding administrations. Now, those foreign governments who now have the lead in high-tech electronics manufacturing, they're not going to just send it back. They know they've got an advantage. The real worth of the technology isn't the technology, but the jobs it creates in their economy. And they're not going to let go of that. So the only option left for us is to leapfrog forward into what is next, what is beyond the current technology. Photonics, who knows? But we have to find it. And the best way to find it is with a civilian technology incubator, meaning a space program. Not necessarily under NASA. More about that when we come back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're talking about this article that's over in WindsorStar.com about how Donald Trump might just make going to the moon great again. Maybe as a jumping off point, or as I mentioned the other day, a base on the moon on the far side for radio astronomy. But in a general term, we need a new space program, a revitalized space program. We need a space program that is rededicated to solving the problems of going to the other planets in our solar system, and in the process of solving those problems, coming up with the new technologies on which to found new industries, which will create new jobs, new products that we will sell to the rest of the world. We really need that. Now, the outside of the space program, the only technology incubators tend to be in the military-industrial complex, and they will hang on to their secrets until they're so obsolete and outdated, there's really no commercial application for them. So we need a civilian technology incubator to come up with whatever we're going to build new products around. And that means going on out, maybe finding out if there's something worth digging up on the asteroids. There's already a private company that's trying to secure venture capital to literally mine the asteroid belt. Once you're out of the Earth's gravity well, it's easy to move stuff around, whether it's chunks of water ice or gold, molybdenum, iron. The problem with NASA, first of all, I was there in the early days when NASA went through the transition to the new NASA, where the scientists and engineers were taken out of control of the space program, and they wanted to make it more business-like, and so they put in all these MBAs and political appointees to try and tell all the scientists and engineers who built all of this stuff how to run it. Probably the most visible manifestation of the boneheadedness of this was the Challenger disaster, where the engineers at Morton Thiokol were saying, do not launch that thing with frozen O-rings. And the political leadership of NASA were saying, well, we've got the teacher in space on board, and the world is watching. We're trying to prove that we can run a scheduled service to low Earth orbit, and it's important that we keep up that image. And they went ahead and launched, and partly it was they were aware there'd been burn-throughs on those O-rings before, but they'd never been a problem. The navigation computer was able to sort of adjust for that extra tongue of flame coming on out, but everybody knew it was only a matter of time until there was a burn-through in a critical location, which is what happened on Challenger, where the flame came on out and was actually burning on one of the struts holding the SRB on. The strut broke loose. The SRB pivoted into the central tank. Boom. It was all there. And I actually knew one of the crew, Judy Resnick. I'd actually worked with her just a few months before the Challenger disaster. And then there was this big thing of covering it all up and NASA saying, well, we know those O-rings couldn't have possibly failed. And Richard Fenneman, I think it was, came on out and demonstrated with a glass of ice water. No, they're not as resilient as you think. And all too often we see politicians thinking that politics can overturn reality and the real world and science. We certainly saw it through human-caused global warming. But we do need to get on back. I don't know if the current NASA management structure is going to be up to the task of taking us back to the planets and being a technology incubator, because for the last going on 12 years, NASA's entire mission has been to support the human-caused global warming hoax, to take temperature readings, put up satellites that report the Earth is broiling, like that NOAA 16 satellite that was over-reporting temperatures by 10 degrees. And the carbonazis are still using that citation to claim the world is warming. We need to break all of these scientific organizations free from political interference, or we're going to get lousy science. That's always the result. When science is declared subordinate to political or corporate interest, you get bad science. That must stop. All right, going to take another break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're just now getting word they've had a very large earthquake near Fiji, magnitude 7.2, tsunami watches along that part of the ocean, but no tsunami threat here to Hawaii. The Earth has really been kind of rocking and rolling lately. A lot of stuff going on. We're still keeping an eye on that Bogoslov volcano up in the Aleutians, which has been erupting on and off. They just backed that aviation alert back down from red to orange, but of course it could erupt again at any moment. And so the whole planet's kind of shaking, rocking and rolling out there. Alrighty, getting on back here. Let's talk about human-caused global warming. Because anybody who says there's no such thing as a grand conspiracy to defraud the public, this is it right here. This is an example of how politicians will lie to you using the corporate media and politically dominated scientists to sell you an idea. To take something that happens naturally, declare it a crisis that threatens your very life, and then offers to sell you a solution. It's called the Hegelian dialectic. It's like this guy who's standing in the middle of the town square waving his arms around. Somebody comes up and says, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm keeping the wild elephants away." The second guy says, "There are no wild elephants for thousands of miles around here." And the first guy says, "See, it works. That'll be $10, please." That's kind of how this whole thing works. Now, remember back in 2000, the UK Independent ran a banner headline, "Snowfalls are now a thing of the past." This was followed by an article in the BBC saying that because of human-caused global warming, the ski resort industry was going to collapse. Oh, it's going to be terrible. If you don't pay a carbon tax, there'll be no more snow skiing. Well, once again, just like that whopper with Russian hacking the Vermont power station, the corporate media was full of it again. And what we're actually hearing from around the world, ski resorts are seeing a major boost in business. The snow came early. It's powdery. They're doing a great business up there. Gee, Al Gore and the corporate media were wrong again. Snow on New Year's Eve for the lower mainland. This is out in Vancouver. Now, you need to understand Vancouver normally doesn't get a huge amount of snow because they're at the receiving end of what's called the Pineapple Express, which is warm air coming from around here in Hawaii, and it flows across the ocean and up the coast, and it makes landfall around that part of Canada. And so Vancouver traditionally has warmer weather than the rest of Canada, but they're still getting snow up there. 10 inches of snow in West Michigan, hazardous commutes, everyone be careful. Have your snow chains. If you don't have your winter tires on by now, you're in trouble already. Now, over at Yellowstone, which is a beautiful, beautiful place, sits over a very large supervolcano. And it's famous for this geyser called Old Faithful. And Old Faithful got its name because it used to erupt with absolute clock-like precision. Now, following an earthquake some years ago, it's lost its precision, but it's still traditionally called Old Faithful. It is so cold in Yellowstone right now that the boiling hot water coming out of Old Faithful is freezing instantly, and what tourists are seeing is a snow geyser. You've probably seen these YouTube videos about real cold weather. People will go out with a pail of hot water and just throw it in the air, and it instantly freezes, turns to snow. That's exactly what's going on. Now, hundreds are currently without power in the interior of Alaska. Winter storm has come on through, dropped all the power lines. Hundreds of people in the Fairbanks area without power. It's a really rough situation there. And, of course, the Environmental Protection Agency is in there reminding the Alaskans that they shouldn't be burning wood to stay warm. I'm not kidding you. They're trying to come on out there saying that because of laws controlling particulate matter in the air, you shouldn't be burning wood to stay warm. These people do not have access to coal. They do not have access to natural gas. The electricity is now out. And so the EPA is out there reminding people they shouldn't be burning wood because it leads to air pollution. And frankly, the people of Alaska are saying the EPA is being ridiculous, and they are. Until you remember that the EPA's real purpose is not to protect the environment, but to look while it's protecting the environment, while it's grabbing up public and sometimes private lands as part of this federal government land grab. And this gets on back to Obama's declaring 2 new national monuments, one of which encircles the land of the Bundy Ranch. Now, when Teddy Roosevelt created the first national monument, Devil's Tower, he declared it in an area where there were people who owned the land. It was considered open public land. They didn't chase those people who were living on it off. But lately, going back to Bill Clinton, we've seen the power to create national monuments actually used to grab and sequester valuable land and valuable natural resources away from the American people who really own it all. You need to remember there is a portion in the Constitution called the Enclave Clause that says the federal government is not allowed to own any land other than what is underneath federal government buildings, military bases, and federal infrastructure like harbors and airports. The Constitution does not allow them to go on out and with the stroke of a pen grab tens of millions of acres and say, well, this is now ours. Especially because it involves kicking off the rightful owners. It's an abuse of an older law. And the lawsuits are already piling up on this one. People are fighting back. And they should fight back. The federal government is supposed to be the custodian of this nation. Doesn't mean he owns the building. But that's the correct model. That's the model the Founding Fathers set on up. The federal government was a caretaker only. It existed to arbitrate disputes between the states who had the real power in this country. The federal government are the janitors. We give them the keys. We trust them to keep the roads working, the plumbing working, keep the trash out. That's it. That's their job. They're not allowed to simply say, well, we now own the whole building. That's not the way the rules work. Now then, getting on back to human-caused global warming. Nobel laureate Ivar Givar gave a speech at the Nobel laureates meeting back in July of 2015. And he went down the list of all the mistakes that Barack Obama made in his speeches about global warming. And basically came on out and said, when you're looking at the raw data, there's no global warming. The world is cooling. It's only if you're getting your data from these U.S. government agencies like NOAA, which has been caught rigging the data flat out, that there's an illusion of warming. And that's what it is. It's a crafted illusion. Think back to the ClimateGate scandal at the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia. Somebody inside leaked out the emails where they talk about hiding the decline, and they leaked out the actual source code for the computer software that was creating the hockey stick. And you can see right in that source code, it simply says, starting at this year, add so many degrees to the temperature per year. There is no scientific justification for doing that. It's a hack. They hacked their own code to get the desired result, because after all, their funding is to study human-caused global warming, and if the world is getting cooler, they might actually have to go on out and get real jobs. Now, you've probably heard this nonsense about a consensus. 97% of the world's climate scientists are fully on board with Al Gore and his nonsense. Well, as it turns out, that 97% was as much a fraud as any other part. There were names on the list who were not respected climatologists, who weren't degreed, weren't recognized. A lot of people on that list didn't give their permission for the name to be on the list. They were just grabbing names to be. These are all the people who are fully on board. Now, Forbes went on out and did a peer-reviewed survey and finds the majority of scientists around the world are skeptical of this phony global warming crisis, especially as we're heading into another hard winter. Now, when you look at some of the silliness that has come on down to support this agenda, why isn't it warm where I am? Oh, well, it's cold where you are, but trust us, it's broiling hot in the Arctic or at the bottom of the ocean, places you couldn't possibly get to and check for yourself. Just take our word for it. We're the government, after all. You can't trust your government. Who can you trust? I remember when they came out with that nonsense about the world is still warming, but the heat is hiding at the bottom of the ocean. Really? Ever hear about something called convection? As I mentioned before, one of the big embarrassments was this satellite that was put up to monitor global temperatures, NOAA 16. And it was dutifully reporting, oh, it's a hot planet. It's hotter than we thought it was. And NOAA didn't even bother double-checking their own data. They just went with it and said, oh, yeah, this is it. These are the numbers that we want. And it took literally thousands of independent researchers on the ground to say, look, I've got a thermometer here, and it's not reporting what your satellite says should be outside the window. And finally NOAA said, oh, all right. And they yanked the data off their servers. It's not there anymore. But that hasn't stopped everybody who's pushing global warming from continuing to claim NOAA 16 proved the Earth was warming. And when they go to means like that, you understand this is not science, it's politics. It's the weaponized narrative to get your carbon tax money out of you. And that's all it was. Think of all the lies you have been told by this government and the corporate media during your entire lifetime. As an exercise, you might want to just sit down someplace with pad and paper, so the NSA doesn't know what you're doing, and just write down all the things that you know were a lie. Crazed lone nut assassin, John F. Kennedy. Another crazed lone nut assassin, Robert Kennedy. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin, Spanish mine in Havana Harbor, Lusitania not carrying weapons, Pearl Harbor, complete surprise. Nobody had any idea they were coming. Saddam's nukes, Assad's sarin gas, and human-caused global warming. Just make that list and look at it. And really confront the reality that we live under a government that has controlled us, rules us, loots us, sends our children off to be killed and crippled in wars with lies, fraud, and deception. And then decide if you're comfortable living under a government that rules you with lies, fraud, and deception. And then ask the next most important question. For those of you who are parents, are you comfortable with your children growing up under a government that will control them, plunder their wealth, send their kids off to be killed and crippled in wars of conquest on the basis of lies, fraud, and deception? We know we're being lied to about so many things. And we don't need to get bogged down in the tiny, fine details that are put out there to try and get us to argue amongst ourselves. It's time for all Americans to understand we're being lied to. We're living in a real-life version of the movie The Matrix, where we've been convinced that what is on these flat screens, on that printed page, what's coming out of the radio represents the real world, and it does not. We can all agree we're being lied to. Now we have to agree, what are we going to do about it? Obviously, a big part of that is the independent media, which has sprung up out of necessity to keep the public informed as to what's really going on. And that's why the government and the corporate media have their knickers in a twist. Because they've been getting by with lies, fraud, and deception so long, they don't know any other way to operate. It's all they know how to do. Trickery, deceit. That's all they know how to do. That's all these politicians know how to do, is fool you, deceive you, swindle you, turn you into a victim to their confidence games. That's what they do. It's all that they do. And they're in a panic here. This story that the Washington Post came on out with, Russia hacked a Vermont power station, proves they cannot change what they do, even after all the recent embarrassments about declaring the independent media to be arms of Russian propaganda, and they got embarrassed on that one. And still, their motto seems to be, if at first you don't succeed, lie, lie again. Do you like being made a fool of? Do you like looking like a naive moron to the rest of the world? Because the rest of the world knows what's going on. When I was going through my period of international travel back in the 1980s, the rest of the world had a very low opinion of Americans by virtue of how easily we were being swindled by our own government. So just out of a sense of self-respect, we have to stand up and say, I will not be lied to any longer. I will not believe the bovine excrement, no matter how much you wrap it in patriotic duty. Because my personal fortunes, my quality of life, and the life and limb of my children are on the line here if I believe the government's propaganda. And I'm glad to see that currently polls are showing Americans' trust in the government and the corporate media are down in the single digits. Got more people watching Gardening Channel and Cartoon Network than watch CNN. But the numbers at our servers and our independent radio networks, they're up. People are going to go where they know they can find the facts about what is going on. They're not going to be lured back to the corporate media by very flashy sets and video effects and really cute people in tight-fitting clothes. It doesn't work that way. It never has. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about science and health issues here. And there's a very alarming story that came out of Blacklisted News about how in the closing days of the Obama administration, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which I mentioned before is about land grabbing more than it is about the environment, is going to dramatically increase allowable public exposure to radioactive levels, thousands of times above the maximum limits of the Safe Drinking Water Act. And basically, they're coming up with a system because there are so many radioactive problems going on. There's Hanford, Fukushima, going back to 3 Mile Island, and there's likely to be more. And so basically, this all came out through a lawsuit brought by the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. And basically, it's saying that during the intermediate period following a radiation release, and possibly for as long as several years, the EPA will automatically raise the safe level of radiation number so you feel okay about the water and the air, even as your hair starts to fall on out. It's kind of like the issue with Fukushima, where they came on out and said there's been this huge release, then 24 hours later, a guy made a mistake with the calculator. It's really not that big a deal, and Ann Coulter came on out and said radiation's good for you. And all these years later, TEPCO in Japan is saying, yeah, it was that bad all the way back then, but we have to manage the public. No, you don't. You have to inform the public so they can make good choices. Well, if we tell them their homes are a radioactive mess, they're going to leave and be part of somebody else's economy and somebody else's tax base. We have to keep them right where they are. Those people who are downstream from Hanford really need to be very careful about what's coming out of the faucet or over the air. Look at the problem with the lead contamination in the drinking water. It was first made public because of what happened in Flint, Michigan. Now we're finding out there are tens of thousands of cities in America where the water coming out of the tap from your government-managed utility is actually even more toxic than what they have in Flint, Michigan. So they'll put up some posters and say, it's really okay. One of the problems Donald Trump is going to have to be dealing with is the condition of our infrastructure. It has been allowed to decay through years of war. We've been on a wartime economy going all the way back to 2003. Your money is not spent on the quality of your life. It's not spent on your roads. It's not spent on the rail system. Everything's hovering at the edge of collapse because the money is gone for war. It's time to bring that money back and rebuild our nation. And that's part of what Trump means by Make America Great Again. We'll be back after the station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at this article, came out of What's Up With That, where scientists over at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology are predicting more extreme storms from California due to warming. But there's already a problem in the climate model that they're using for the prediction doesn't match history. And one of the big problems with the global warming cult, as it were, is the over-reliance on computer models and the failure to go back and validate that they're actually mimicking something approaching reality. Now, computers are just wonderful calculating machines, but they're only going to produce a result based on whatever assumptions and raw data are fed into them, garbage in, garbage out. And we've got quotes from some of the so-called lights of the global warming cult saying, we don't need to go out and make field measurements. We have the model. The model tells us what we want to see. And that, of course, is complete, utter nonsense. If your model is not mimicking reality, the model is flawed. Now, given that these are people at MIT, I can understand a certain arrogance from them. My father went to MIT, and I got to see the personality up close. It's not just that they must be right, everybody else must be proven wrong. And sometimes that institutional arrogance can blind them to the fact that, yeah, they are, in fact, making some mistakes here. All righty, let's grab some phone calls. Dorothy in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha. I have a question, and I could be really slow on the uptake on this. What is a land trust fund, and is it legal for retired teachers to invest in?
Boy, we're off the edge of the map here, and I think you're going to have to talk to your financial planner about that. I mean, if you look at my bank account, you realize I'm nobody's expert on how to make money. So, but I think the reason for caution...
I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher. I just don't know what a land trust fund is. I'm sorry. You're
gonna need a financial analyst to work with you on that, and I say that out of an abundance of caution because remember, back in 2008, everybody was being told these mortgage-backed securities were a great investment, and they turned out to be outright fraudulent. So you're going to have to invest the time and recruit some expert help to look at this and see if it's really going to work on out. Because unfortunately, as we're seeing, there is a huge amount of fraud in the entire financial sector. They're allowed to get away with it because it makes it look like the economy is still moving forward. But at this point, and this is just a personal opinion and not meant to guide anybody else, but if I have any investment capital at all, I'd be putting it into silver and gold. Although I learned the hard way that those gold coins lose their value when you eat the chocolate bit out of the middle.
Okay, thanks a lot.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Sorry I couldn't be more help. Switch over to Scott in Norfolk. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I just had a question or a comment about the increasingly what's become the surveillance state here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that this is going to be part of the downfall of this corrupt government because I think what's happened is the citizens really, they know that all their phone calls can be pulled up, all their emails can be pulled up at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way to avoid that happening is to stay under the radar And I think what's going to happen is I know that politicians and the government, certain agencies of the government, do a lot of polling all the time, every day, especially after news stories. They send out trial balloons to see how the public's going to handle a certain policy. And the feedback they're getting is not the honest feedback. I think a lot of citizens who are getting polled are not telling the truth because they know, listen, my calls they could be pulled up at any time. I'm going to give the answer I think that they want. And what I think is going to happen is the government's going to get ahead of itself. It's going to poll certain things, when it starts taking rights away from us, and the polls are going to show, oh, the public will take this, when in reality, the public doesn't like it.
No, you're absolutely right.
I think they're going to cross the line, the Rubicon, and it's going to be too late, and they're going to get a spontaneous reaction to the sort that Tunisia got when that government official slapped the face of that vendor salesperson. Remember what I'm talking about in Tunisia when the inspection official?
Yeah, I remember that one. Well, there's another model. There's another model you can look at, and that, of course, is the revolution in Romania that brought down Ceausescu. Because 2 weeks before it all fell apart, anybody looking around Romania would have said, well, the Romanian people are happy with this. Yes, there's TV cameras on every street pole and everything, but they seem to be okay. And then all of a sudden, there was this sporting event, and there was an upset there, and it just spawned this spontaneous political rally. And 2 weeks later, Ceausescu was machine gunned to death on Romanian national television. It could happen just that fast. And you're absolutely right about people being constrained in their poll responses by the awareness of all the surveillance. And there's a real-world example of that. It goes back to something called the Combat Arms Survey, which was being given to Marines all across America to ask them, would they fire on American citizens who resisted gun confiscation? And I knew this gentleman who'd been at 29 Palms when this was going down. He was doing some graphics work for us when we were still in North Hollywood. A really nice guy, like most military I know, strict constitutionalist. And he said that everybody in the unit said that they would agree to shoot American citizens who resisted gun confiscation because that was clearly what the officers wanted to hear. He says the reality is that, no, none of them would have actually done it. And so polls can be influenced by a wide variety of ways. And people can start believing their own propaganda. That's always a danger sign, whether it's in politics or even in Hollywood. If you believe your own PR, you're headed for a major, major fall. But I think one of the reasons that we are in such a dangerous time is, and the 2016 election showed it, our elites are seriously out of touch with what's going on with ordinary Americans, with us deplorables, the flyovers. And they really got caught by surprise at the anger that's out here. There's rebellion is still in the air as far as I can tell. I'm hoping that under President Trump we can do a 180 and start that long, slow march back to a constitutional republic with a democratically elected government. But we still might not be able to avoid a Soviet Union-style collapse.
Well, here's another, and I agree with what you said, but here's another on a different subject. When you get these surveillance states, I don't think we're as advanced in it socially as the Soviet Union was. I think there's a lot of people still asleep in our country compared to what was going on in the Soviet Union. But there's a lot of citizens who will use that surveillance state to their advantage, whether it be through a messy divorce, they want to report their wife or their husband is doing something, unpatriotic or illegal. And I saw this when I visited Bulgaria and Poland.
Yes.
Where they are still trying to come to terms with releasing information on folks that basically, spied on their neighbors. There were so many of them.
Same thing in Nazi Germany. Same thing in Nazi Germany. And we're already going down that path right now because Facebook is not allowing regular Facebook users to post articles from my website to their Facebook timeline because somebody anonymously has complained. And so we're being turned into a nation of people who are spying and snitching on each other, just as happened under the Nazis. So yeah, we're definitely heading down there. But people are kind of aware of what's going on. Once they lose confidence and trust and faith in the government, it's only a matter of time before it starts to come apart. And I'm afraid that because Donald Trump is going to be dealing with this economic collapse, that he too will lose the trust of the American people, and that will be our last chance at avoiding a Soviet Union-style collapse will be gone.
Well, here's my take on Trump, and I'm a recovering liberal. I'm no longer part of the Democratic Party.
You got mugged.
I lost faith in it the moment you told me about underwater volcanoes and that global warming was a scam, which I agree.
Yes. And
when Obama and Kerry lied about Syria having weapons of mass destruction, here's what I told people, my conservative friends and liberal friends, about Trump before the election. I said, this is not a normal election. A lot of us are not voting for somebody who represents our values. We are voting for basically a dragon slayer. And we don't care if he's a nice guy. We don't care if he's a good guy. We don't care if he's nice to his dog. We don't care. We want him to slay the dragon, which is the establishment.
Yes. You've absolutely got it right there. It's like when you've got leaky pipes in your home and you hire a plumber, you want a plumber who's going to fix the leaky pipes, and if he's using profanity, who cares? That's not what he's there for. And that's why all of this attempt to frame Donald Trump for touching women during the beauty pageants or whatever, it didn't go anywhere because we're sick of political correctness because it's become a mask for the institutional failings of the establishment. They keep us distracted with, you shouldn't use these words and you shouldn't think these thoughts, when the real issue is our nation is falling apart around us, and we have to pay attention to that now.
And I think Trump gained his street credibility when not only did he defeat his own party, the GOP, for the nomination, but then he beat the DNC and the establishment at the polls when both parties were fraudulently adding votes against him.
Yes.
It's probably one of the few times the GOP establishment was packing ballot boxes for votes for a Democratic candidate. He still beat them. And I have a feeling it's because the polls, people weren't telling the truth when they were being polled before the election. No one really wanted to say they were voting for Trump, me included. I did not tell people I was going to vote for Trump.
Okay.
I'm a former liberal. But my point being, when the economy does crash, I still think I'm still going to be on the side of the Dragon Slayer. I really am. Because here's the reason. We don't have any more money for me to be a liberal.
Yes.
We're $20 trillion in debt. I can't be a liberal. There's no money left for that.
Yes.
There's none. And for my conservative friends who are disenchanted with the GOP, with Bush, Mitt Romney was the straw that broke the camel's back. That guy, Romney Care versus Obamacare.
Yes.
Conservatives knew that was a fraud. That was a setup. We're not going for it. And this guy, Trump, no matter what happens to the economy, we're going to support him. It really doesn't matter. We want him to destroy the establishment. And if that means the economy has to go down, let it be. And I don't say that lightly.
No, I understand. There's going to be a lot of suffering and everything. And the collapse of the economy could be the beginning of the Soviet Union-style collapse of the entire U.S. establishment. And again, I feel sorry for Trump that he happened to be president at this particular moment in history, but then there wouldn't have been any other moment in history when he could be president. He basically came into a nation that was totally disaffected with establishment politics. Wall Street, Israel dominated Washington, D.C., and people were looking for an outsider, and he was the outsider, and that's why he won the election. That's why I supported him. And it wasn't a question of Democrats and Republicans both stuffing the ballot boxes against Donald Trump. What we were seeing were the death throes of the narcocracy that has been a curse on this nation for the last 30 years.
I agree. And that's my last point, Michael. is I want Hillary and Bill and George W. Bush to get fair trials, but I want them to have trials. And this idea that we cannot put a president through trial because we don't want to be like a banana republic. We have never put a president in prison before. So I think after 200 years, we can handle putting at least one in prison.
I agree.
Lying us into a war.
I agree.
Or selling secrets to China.
Yes.
Or selling, basically, they sold our jobs overseas. They took money from foreign governments to win elections, and the return was to sell our manufacturing overseas. And to sell us on the idea that a free market means we'll have to accept 1% growth a year from now on. They actually convinced us of it. And the only thing that will make me turn on Trump is if he does not give Hillary a trial and Bill. I would really like to see George W. and Cheney.
I would too. I'd like to see them, put on trial. As far as jail's concerned, I actually have a preferred punishment. These people are all money junkies, and the best way to punish a money junkie is you take away all their money, you make them poor people, you make them homeless. That is a fate worse than death or prison to a money junkie, to not have that money any longer. That's why so many of the nobility during the French Revolution, they walked up to that guillotine gladly because life wasn't worth living without all of their wealth and pleasures. And
Michael, if we had given George H.W. a trial for drug smuggling to Central America back in the late 80s, we wouldn't have had George W. and we wouldn't have had Bill Clinton.
No, we wouldn't have.
We wouldn't have had either one of them.
Well, the reason our nation is in the mess that it's in, and this is directed to all of you government agents who are monitoring this broadcast for various interests here. The nation is in the mess it's in right now because back during the 1980s, you did not do your job. You looked the other way when the CIA was smuggling guns down to Nicaragua and cocaine back to sell to our children. You didn't do your job when White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster was murdered and dumped in Fort Marcy Park. You just went along with the political flow here, and what we have today, our nation hovering on the edge of collapse, is all your fault because you ignored your duty and the obligations of your office.
And if anybody looks up, Googles Eugene Hassenfuss.
Yes.
And go from there. Do your own independent research. Be your own critical thinker. And go from there. It will tell you, especially with the technology we have today, there's no way drugs can get into this country at the magnitude that they're getting in without the government helping out, without the government doing it. There's just no way.
The CIA's had a license to smuggle going all the way back to the Reagan administration and his Attorney General, William French Smith, who rewrote the rules to say the CIA can be involved in drug smuggling and not have to report it to the DEA. And that's where all of this stuff came on out, Operation Screwworm out of Arkansas, and basically in a repeat of the corruption of Prohibition, these drug criminals had enough money to literally buy their way to the highest levels of the U.S. government, and they ran our nation as a personal little druggy kingdom. So forget about not being seen as a banana republic. We're already there. We're a narco republic, and we're finally got a chance to pull out of it with Donald Trump.
And in this aspect, being a banana republic, I wish we could be like a banana republic. I'm seeing Brazil have the guts. Now, well, I don't know if they're right or wrong, but they believe that they have a president that was corrupt, and they're taking it on.
Oh, and they should. I mean, Colombia put their president on trial for drug running. Unfortunately, he was acquitted, but at least the Colombian people had the courage to do that, and we the American people need to have the courage to demand that as well. And again, I still would like a further accounting for just what information went out of Hillary Clinton's private email server to foreign interests, and did those foreign interests respond in kind by donating money to the Clinton Foundation?
And that's the key, the money. I'm a former banker. let's say we had no technology to see what's coming across the border. You can't move hundreds of billions of dollars through our banking system without the government knowing. You can't. They have algorithms that can pick apart.
They set up protected channels. They set up protected. Remember BCCI? That was the protected channel. That's okay.
Do you remember?
I'm going to have to let you go. I'm sorry. We're going to take a break for commercials, and I got a bunch of other callers waiting. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who rejoined our network, and I wasn't able to do the shout-out a little bit earlier here. Let's go back to the phones. Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I'm sure you may have, I got into the show a little late today. I'm sure you may have touched on this earlier. What is wrong with these Republicans? I mean, they're not only reprehensible, are they that stupid? I mean, this is the first point of business that they bring up is to trash this ethics office.
Well, they've already pulled back on that. They've pulled back on it because the public outcry, and even Donald Trump said, "You got to be kidding." They have withdrawn that proposal now.
No, I'm aware of that, but it took Trump to come out and make that tweet, and for that the backlash from the public for them to pull back. But it just tells you what these people are all about.
Well, yeah, I mean, we understand, politics is a permanently enshrined criminal class here. I remember a few years ago in the aftermath of the 2008 mortgage-backed security meltdown, they wanted to pass a law specifically prohibiting members of Congress from engaging in insider trading given their access to information. Yeah. Now, technically, it's illegal for them to engage in insider trading anyway, but they felt something with more teeth was needed, and of course, Congress voted it out almost unanimously. They want to go on basically profiting from their positions.
Well, they're all millionaires.
Yes.
99.99% of them are millionaires thanks to their insider deals. So,
well, hardly a representative body, is it?
No, of course not. Mike, two other things, two other matters. I find it amusing, like especially the Hillary supporters, those who are maybe in their 40s or 50s or 60s. These were the same people who had nothing but contempt for the CIA and the FBI. But now, whatever the CIA says regarding this Russia thing is gospel. Oh, it's got to be the truth. The CIA is saying it. I mean,
well, that's what we're getting from the corporate media, but I can assure you that ordinary people in the streets, they're not buying this. Because they're seeing Russia hacking is the 2017 version of Saddam has nuclear weapons.
Right. Well, that's what I tell these morons on Facebook. Last thing, Mike. By the way, your previous caller, the liberal, what happened in Brazil was not good. It was a soft coup. Rousseff was, she was illegally taken out of office by the corrupt Brazilian Congress. So it wasn't a good thing. And then as far as Mike, do you put much stock in the work of James Perloff?
We agree on some things. I've linked to some of his articles. Some things he has a position on. I don't agree with him.
I'm speaking about the CFR, and I'm wondering if Tillerson and some of Trump's other people are members of the CFR. I'm sure Trump isn't, but I worry about his cabinet choices if most of them. I think Tillerson is a member of the CFR, so because they tend to select people from corporate America, especially the companies like ExxonMobil, Goldman Sachs. So that worries me a little bit because these people basically give the marching orders for our foreign and defense policy and financial matters as well.
Well, they don't give the marching orders, but they're definitely in a position to wield some influence. But I think given the current state of our economy, given the current state of all of our interventions around the world, I think anybody who's out there saying, let's invade another country, let's have another covert overthrow, that's going to be a hard sell in Washington, D.C. right now because this whole conquer the Middle East oil nations and shackle them to the dollar plan, which was Wesley Clark blew the whistle on that back in 2005, I think it was, it's clearly failed. We're stuck in a quagmire in Afghanistan. We're stuck in a quagmire in Iraq. We're losing Syria. We've got more quagmires in Libya and Yemen. This thing was supposed to be over and done with by 2008. And our country is running out of money. It's running out of materiel to prolong these wars any further. Our latest generation of weapons are all very expensive junk. We're ill-suited to continue to project power to the rest of the world. And I think that we're probably going to see the war hawks are going to have a very tough time for the next 8 years.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, thank you so much, Mike.
All right, thanks. We're going to let you go. Take another break. Back with more phone calls. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And before we go back to the phones here, I want to make a mention about an article we have linked to whatreallyhappened.com. It's a peer-reviewed scientific paper, and the title of it is, take a deep breath, An Integrated Multi-Omics Analysis of the NK603 Roundup-Tolerant GM Maize Reveals Metabolism Disturbances Caused by the Transformation Process. And I included the abstract there, but basically distilling it down, it's saying something we've been saying all along. Genetically modified organisms are significantly different from the real organisms in ways that are unrelated to the original intent of the designer, mostly involving protein expression and the ingestion of proteins which are close to the ones you get from the natural food, but not exactly the same, and hence can lead to all kinds of medical issues. We're going to go back to the phones here. Francis in Vancouver, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Doing good.
I wanted to call you today because I want to draw your attention to, and all your audience's attention to, probably one of the best documentaries of 2016, and it's called 0 Days.
Absolutely.
And it tells the story of Stuxnet, but it goes way beyond what I thought the story was about. And it depicts the fact that the whole Stuxnet thing, that the whole plot backfired on the United States. And initially it was designed to be a very subtle operation, and the Israelis took it over and made it a much more crude and aggressive weapon. And they did do damage to the Iranian nuclear program for about a year and a half.
Yes.
But in the end, the Iranians solved the problems that were involved with it at some cost, and at the same time, they developed their own cyber weapons. And then the documentary goes on and shows how now, like, there's a fifth arm of the military. Like, originally there was just the Army and the Navy, and then we got an Air Force in World War I, and then we got a Space Command, and now we have the Cyber Command that's grown up out of the NSA. And it looks, by the end of the documentary, it shows this whole frightening scenario that even nuclear weapons seem to be kind of obsolete, and that the war of the future is going to be a computer war where they can basically just come in and shut down your whole country. All your water supplies, all your nuclear plants, your electric generation, everything. They can just shut the whole thing down.
Well,
there's anything we can do about it.
Well, here's the point you need to remember. In the case of Iran, Iran's computers that were controlling their civilian power station enrichment facility were not connected to the Internet. So somebody had to walk in, somebody had to be bribed or threatened to walk on in with a flash drive and inject the virus. And that's the same reason we knew this story about Russia hacking the Vermont power station was nonsense, because critical computer networks are not allowed to be connected to the global Internet for precisely that reason. Now, the other part of the Stuxnet story that a lot of people don't talk about, and they didn't go into it in what I felt was enough depth in 0 days, was that the more aggressive, more destructive version of Stuxnet broke into the wild, and it was infecting computers and PDCs all over Russia, causing all kinds of industrial damage. We know that Stuxnet was in computers surrounding Fukushima prior to the quake and tsunami. We also know that Fukushima's safety systems were built around the same Siemens PDCs that were being used in Iran, and they failed to operate correctly during this disaster. And so it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Stuxnet had accidentally infected Fukushima and compromised the safety systems that failed to operate properly when the disaster struck.
Well, I would add to that, not necessarily accidentally. There's a lot of stuff about Fukushima and the Japanese sending nuclear equipment for refining uranium-253 and to Iran. And this may have been revenge by Israel on Japan.
Well, if that were to be proven to be the case, then we're dealing here with a government that is literally willing to condemn millions of people to horrible death from radiation just to make a political point.
Well, that's the whole problem with Israel. I mean, who are these people? It's this, it's a it gets to be pretty, like, they're running everything. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I mean, I believe 9/11 was the Mossad coup d'etat of the United States.
Well, I have a slightly different opinion. I think the U.S. and Israel were working together on this one, and probably the biggest single foreign policy disaster of the Bush years was this idea that the U.S. could partner with Israel on something this horrendous and not have Israel turn around and blackmail the U.S. government with this information from then onward. And if you look at U.S.-Israeli relations from before 9/11 and then after 9/11, you immediately see that after 9/11, whatever Israel demanded, the U.S. would do. The U.S. stopped being an impartial arbiter of peace in the Middle East at that point. Okay?
Well, I feel that Webster Tarpley is a big proponent of the whole angel is next theory. And that is that it was a full-blown coup d'etat and the neocons got control over the nuclear codes and were basically had George W. Bush up in the air in Air Force One, and they were showing him that they had control of the U.S. and he didn't. And he spent the whole day of 9/11 in flight, running around, and he wound up in Omaha, Nebraska at some big golf tournament birthday party with Warren Buffett and all the wealthiest people in the United States. And that whole narrative is very suspicious to me. And it's like when I was a kid growing up, there was these really great movies, political thrillers. And there were movies like 7 Days in May.
Yes.
And, Failsafe. And that whole scenario of what George W. Bush did and went through, he had 3 threats on his life, serious threats on his life on 9/11. And I believe that the whole U.S. government was hijacked by neocon conspirators.
Well, there's no question that while George Bush was down at the school in Sarasota and flying around to all these other places, Dick Cheney was in the heart of this whole thing up there in the Situation Room. And we have that testimony of a cabinet member that they were tracking the plane coming on in to hit the Pentagon, and somebody was doing a countdown, 10 miles out, 5 miles out, and then said, "Did the orders still stand?" And Cheney said, "Have you heard anything from me that says the orders are different?" And nobody's really sure what he meant, but of course the plane just carried right on through, circled around, and crashed into the Pentagon, right into the offices of the accountants trying to find where that $3 trillion had vanished to.
Well, that's it. It's going to be interesting. This is going to be probably this last year, watching this whole campaign and Donald Trump actually going to InfoWars and being on InfoWars. I mean, that's implicitly saying something, right?
Oh, absolutely. 2017.
For that. And this is going to be a very interesting year because Trump is actually on the record, and I saw a really good video of this interview where Trump was saying, for example, there's $36 billion in $100 bills that was on pallets and all covered in shrink-wrapped plastic that was driven in a truck into Iran, and they also did this in Afghanistan, and they were giving out huge quantities of this money to warlords that they wanted on their side as bribes. And
yes.
That $36 billion disappeared without any accounting record. And Trump said, says, I spent my whole life, having accountants watch accountants, so that I didn't get my money stolen from me. And he says, when I get to be president, I'm going to be calling generals on the carpet, and they're going to tell me where that money went. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, at the time it was $3 trillion. Now it's $4 or $5 trillion that's been stolen from the Pentagon.
Nobody's really sure. Nobody's really sure that's what those accountants were supposed to be doing. The good news is I'm convinced 2017 is going to be the year of the rise of the independent media. The corporate media is self-destructing right now because all they can do is continue to lie, and each new lie is just another nail in their corporate media coffin. And so from this point forward, we have an American people who are now saying, oh, so they weren't really tinfoil hat, wacko conspiracy kooks. They were really onto something, and now they're going to be saying, I want to know what happened to Vince Foster. I want to know what was going on in Arkansas in the 1980s and why so much cocaine was flowing into this country without any control. I want to know what Gary Webb had uncovered, and so forth and so on. And we're going to have a very receptive audience to start basically going back and telling the history of the United States for the last 25 years as it really happened, not as the corporate media would like you to think.
That's it. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And, Donald Trump, I last time I called you, I was a bit upset because I was afraid that Bolton was going to be Secretary of State. And Trump has done everything right here.
Yes.
And
except for
it's
Israel.
going to be an interesting year. I got a lot of hope this year, and I hope things are straightened out.
Well, it's going to be a long, long path here. And as I was saying, even before the election happened, Donald Trump winning the presidency is not the end of our work. It is the beginning. And he's facing an adversarial Congress. He's facing an openly hostile corporate media. And the only way Donald Trump is going to be able to bring about the changes we want is that we, the American people, who are, after all, the highest authority in the land, we're going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump and glare through those windows into the offices of the representatives and senators and say, look, you work for us. You don't work for Israel. You don't work for Big Pharma. You don't work for the military-industrial complex. You work for us. And the instant you forget that, we will do to you what we did to Hillary Clinton, and all the election fraud in the nation is not going to save you, especially if we can succeed in getting a new election system put in sometime in the next 2 years. And that's going to be my top goal.
Hey, did you see what Trump did on New Year's Eve? He kicked a Koch brother right off Mar-a-Lago.
Oh, yeah, I love that. I absolutely love that. That's sending a signal. That is definitely sending a signal.
Well, have a good day, Mike.
All
Thanks
right.
a lot for your radio show.
Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and the other caller just dropped here. We're getting some more updates about that earthquake down in Fiji. They've declared a tsunami watch for coasts within 300 kilometers of Fiji. Again, no tsunami threat here in Hawaii. Of course, Claire and I live up on the top of this hill, so it would take a heck of a tsunami to get to us here. And let's see, Obama is basically running around. It's being described as his FU tour. Settling scores with Netanyahu, with members of the GOP, with the American people who refuse to vote in Hillary Clinton. Now, getting on over to China and getting on past this nonsense about North Korea and China, because North Korea makes a lot of threats, but I sort of see myself with Donald Trump. It's not going to happen. North Korea may be many things. It's not suicidal. Chinese President Xi Jinping has praised a group of middle school students for their work in satellite design, pleased with their passion and bravery in scientific exploration. These middle school kids designed a satellite that was launched last Wednesday. Now, it's been a while since I've heard of American public school students designing satellites. I do remember there were the CubeSats. There was the Getaway Special during the shuttle program, where you could do things like send up tomato seeds and whatnot. But this is how you build for the future. You teach your young people how to think, how to engineer, how to solve problems. Those are skills that are a significant threat to the U.S. federal government and the corporate media. They don't want the kids thinking. They don't want them able to analyze. They just want them to believe as they are told to believe. Believe your government is the best. Believe the corporate media tells you the truth. Believe humans are warming the planet. Believe that vaccines are safe and necessary. Believe GMO is okay. The problem that we have here in the United States of America is that narcocracy has not been running this nation as a nation, but as a religion. It's all based on belief. The liberals' belief that they are making a better world no matter what they do, so anything that they do is okay. They're a lot like the Scientologists in that. which is why I call them the liberalologists, the Church of Liberalology. And by the way, Lee Remini is still continuing her series on Scientology, and that is also something you need to program the DVR to grab. This one's a little out there. If you're a Catholic, plug your ears for a while here. Apparently an Italian priest is being investigated for organizing orgies in his rectory and apparently pimping out 15 of his lovers. Catholic Father Andrea Compin, a parish priest in the city of Padua, is under police investigation on suspicion of living off immoral earnings. And he's probably saying this, hey, Pope Alexander VI did this in the Vatican. What's all the noise and everything going on here? So, it is rather entertaining here. Okay, let's see. Britain is starting to get very, very tense over the Brexit because the March 31st deadline is the original deadline for Britain to be leaving the European Union. And the Remain people are still trying to find some way to delay it, to halt it. We now know that Theresa May has said Parliament does not get this. We're going to go with the will of the people. And now they're actually talking about the possibility of a civil war between those who want to leave the European Union and those who want to enslave Great Britain to the European Union. Now, I think, given the degree of fraud and fakery in the polls and in the Brexit election itself, I think the number of people who are going to be picking up arms on the side of Remain are actually quite small. So I'm not that concerned about it. Will there be staged and organized riots to try and sway it? Maybe. So, now, not too long ago, we showed this video where these scientists in Korea, South Korea, had built what appears to be one of the armored battle suits from the movie Avatar. And it's quite amazing to see. And they just said, oh, the fans are going to love it. Turns out they actually have a practical application for this. And you'll be very surprised to find out what it is, which I'm going to share with you after we come back from these words from our sponsors. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our first show of the year 2017 here. And as I mentioned before the commercial break, a week or so ago, we put up this video of these scientists who had built this 13-foot tall mech suit. And the closest analog that I can think of is the armored suits that you saw in the movie Avatar, which is still my all-time favorite film. And it's going to be a big hit at the science fiction conventions. It turns out they had a purpose of building this thing. It's being designed to help with the cleanup at Fukushima, to allow an operator to sit in the cab with radiation protection around them, walk on in over very uneven surfaces, and pick up and move radioactive debris. Because they've had a problem with the robots they're sending in there, where they're not properly shielded, and the electronics suffer all kinds of failures because of the intense radiation. So that's what they were actually building this thing for. It wasn't just to look at what we can do and show off. So that was pretty impressive right there. Now then, let's see. The Department of Homeland Security has released the border numbers for 2016. They apprehended 530,000, which isn't very much when you consider there's probably 20 million illegal immigrants in Los Angeles County alone, so they're not getting very many of them. They are tracking 59,757 unaccompanied children, and they're all just pouring in here, just like in Germany. They cannot find work. They're piling onto the social systems, straining the already strained economies of these various states. And still George Soros and Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama think this is all really good stuff. We're going to have all kinds of good stuff with this thing. Now then, member just posted this article, interview with Douglas Valentine, saying the same thing I just got done saying. The CIA as organized crime. And that's not really too difficult a reach to make when you consider how many people have been in both the CIA and organized crime. A good example, of course, would be Jack Ruby, who got the very unfortunate task of having to cowboy Lee Harvey Oswald in the basement of the Dallas Police Department building when they failed to kill him at the Texas Movie Theater. And Jack Ruby, his full name's Jack Rubenstein, was not only CIA, he was a bag man for the mob. So there's a lot of overlap. CIA is just the mafia wrapped in the American flag. So, apparently the German Interior Minister wants the federal departure centers to ease deportations. Really, they're not a problem. We should just keep them in here. Now the Orkney Islands are talking about exiting Great Britain and Scotland and becoming their own independent nation. I think this is a healthy trend. I'm opposed to the one world government, global government. I think lots and lots of little tiny nations, self-sufficient, is what serves human civilization best. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.